Oh, it's time to fill my income tax return. So whether I'll be liable to pay tax in India as well? But I don't live in India anymore, so why should I pay tax in India? Hi everyone, I'm Megha and welcome to UGC NET with Megha. In this video, we are going to understand that how to determine the residential status of an individual so as to determine whether his income is taxable in India or not. So now we are going to understand whether a person is liable to pay tax in India or not. That is dependent on the fact that he is considered as resident in India or non-resident in India. So that only would determine his taxability in India. So if he is a resident, then he would be liable to pay tax for his income, and if he is not considered as resident, then he would not be liable to pay tax. So now how do we classify a person as resident or non-resident? So if a person satisfies any of the two conditions given for the test, then he would be considered as resident. But if he does not satisfy those conditions, either of those conditions, then he would be considered as non-resident. So the condition is the first condition given here, and such conditions are also known as basic conditions. So the first condition is if he had stayed in India for more than equal to 182 days in relevant previous year. So now what do we mean by relevant previous year? So the relevant previous year simply means the previous year in question. That means the previous year for which you are to test check the residential status. So if he had stayed for more than equal to 182 days, then it would be considered as resident, otherwise non-resident. Another condition, if this condition does not satisfy, you will also check for the second condition, and if none of them is satisfied, that is neither A nor B is satisfied, then he would be considered as non-resident. So what does the second condition state? It states that he should have stayed in India for more than equal to 60 days in the relevant previous year, and along with that he should have stayed in India for more than equal to 365 days in 4 years immediately preceding the relevant previous year. So for example, if the question says that the previous year is 2020-21, so 4 years immediately preceding 2020-21 would be taken into consideration, that is 19-20, 18-19, 17-18 and 16-17. So for these 4 years duration, if he had stayed for more than 365 days along with 60 days of stay in 2020-21, then he would be considered as resident, otherwise he would be considered as non-resident. Now one more thing you need to keep in mind is that a continuous stay of 182 days or maybe 60 days or 365 days is not required. It can be in parts. For example, if an individual has stayed in India during the months of January and February for 45 days, then he went back to his native place, and then again he came back and he stayed in India during May, June, July for another 65 days and so on. So you can total all these days, and if the aggregate comes out to be 182 days or more, then he would be considered as Indian resident, and same would be the case for calculating 60 days and 365 days. Now there is one exception to this basic condition, that is this second condition is not applicable. You have to only test check the first condition in following cases. The first case is that a person is a citizen of India but he leaves India as a member of a crew, or he is employed outside India. So for the employment purposes, if somebody moves outside India or he leaves India as a member of the crew, that is he is on a ship on a voyage, then only first condition would be checked for him. If he satisfies the first condition, then he is resident. If he does not satisfy the first condition, he would simply be classified as non-resident. This will not be taken into consideration. The second condition is the person of Indian origin is engaged outside India and visits India in any of the previous years. So basically he resides outside India only but is of Indian origin and has visited India in any of the previous year. So what do we understand by the term Indian origin? Simply means that a person is said to be of Indian origin if either of his parents or any of his grandparents, whether paternal or maternal, were born in undivided India, that is India before the partition of 1947, are considered to be of Indian origin. So if such a case is there, then only the condition first would be taken into consideration and the second condition will not be taken into consideration. This will determine whether he is a resident or a non-resident. Now there is another subcategory under resident. Either a person can be ordinarily resident or he will be a not ordinarily resident. Now in case of ordinary resident, he has to satisfy the basic condition. Along with that, he has to satisfy the additional conditions. If he satisfies both these set of conditions, then he would be considered as ordinarily resident in India. If he does not satisfy the additional conditions, then he would be considered as resident but not ordinarily resident, because he is satisfying the basic conditions. So he would be resident but not ordinarily resident. Now if we talk about non-residents here, so their income is not taxable in India, no matter what, because he is not resident in any manner, so his income would not be taxable in India until unless his income accrues or arises in India or deemed to accrue or arise in India. Otherwise, none of his income would be taxable in India. Now, if we talk about resident but ordinarily resident, there all the incomes would be taxable in India, whether Indian income, global income, doesn't matter from where you are earning that income. It would be taxable in India irrespective of the fact that if you have earned any foreign income and you have paid tax in that foreign country for such income, still it would be taxable in India. Now if we talk about resident but not ordinarily resident, then his income would be taxable in India if his income accrues or arises in India or deemed to accrue or arise in India. Now lastly, we are going to understand that how to determine whether an individual is ordinarily resident or not ordinarily resident. So basically there are two conditions which are to be satisfied, that is both the conditions are to be satisfied. So now we are going to understand what are those additional conditions which an individual needs to satisfy in order to be classified as ordinarily resident, and if he doesn't satisfy those conditions together, then he would be considered as not ordinarily resident. The first condition here is that he should have stayed in India for at least 2 years out of 10 years immediately preceding the relevant previous year. And please keep in mind, here it is and, here we had or, but in case of additional conditions it is and, that means both the conditions are to be satisfied. And he must have stayed in India for more than equal to 730 days in 7 years immediately preceding the relevant previous year. So if both the conditions are satisfied, then he is ordinarily resident. If either of the condition is not satisfied or both the conditions are not satisfied, then he would be considered as resident but not ordinarily resident. So now we are going to understand the entire concept with the help of an example. So the question is, check whether Mr. X, a foreign citizen, is a resident for assessment year 2020-21. So now first thing that we need to take into consideration is that he is a foreign citizen. That means he is not an Indian citizen. Next thing, we are given the assessment year 2020-21. So what would be the relevant previous year for us here? The relevant previous year would be 1920. Now, first thing that we are going to check is whether Mr. X satisfies the basic condition. That means we have to see either of the condition is satisfied, either more than equal to 182 days stay in relevant previous year or more than equal to 60 days of stay in relevant previous year and more than equal to 365 days of stay in the immediately preceding 4 previous years. So now we can clearly see that in 1920 he had stayed in India for more than 182 days. So he has satisfied the basic condition. So he will be considered as resident. First step. Next, we have to check whether he is ordinarily resident or not ordinarily resident. So for that we need to see two things. First thing that we need to see is whether he stayed in India for more than equal to 2 years out of 10 years immediately preceding the relevant financial year. So how do we again determine whether he stayed in India for more than 2 years or not? That means his stay should be more than equal to 182 days. That is the first basic condition should be satisfied by him. So if we talk about 1920, this is a relevant previous year and the data of 10 years is given. So let's check whether he is living in India for at least 2 years or not out of 10. So if we can see all this data, first is the year 1617 wherein he is living in India for more than 182 days. Next is the year 15 and 16 where he is living in India for more than 182 days. So he has satisfied the first additional condition. Now we will be test checking for the second additional condition, which says that he should have stayed in India for more than equal to 730 days during the 7 years immediately preceding the relevant financial year. So now we know that Mr. X satisfies the first additional condition. Now we are going to check whether he satisfies the second additional condition or not. So for that we need to see whether he stayed in India for more than equal to 730 days during the 7 years immediately preceding the relevant financial year. So the 7 years which we will be considering here is from 1819 till 1213. So if the sum total of the days given for these years comes out to be more than 730, then he would be considered as ordinarily resident. So let's go through the total. 9 plus 4 is 13, 13 plus 6 is 19, 19 plus 5 is 24, 24 plus 7 is 31. So 1 here and 3 carried forward. So 3 plus 6, 9, 9 plus 3 is 12, 12 plus 9 is 21, 21 plus 3 is 24, 24 plus 8 is 32 and plus 3 is 35. So 5 here and 3 carry forward. So 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 1 5, plus 2 7 and plus 1 8. So 851 days, which means he satisfies the additional condition 2 as well. So we can simply conclude that Mr. X is resident and ordinarily resident. That was all for this video. Thank you for watching this video and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. If you want me to cover any particular topic, you can leave your comments in the comment section, and for more details on our online course, visit our website www.ugcnetwithmegha.com, and the link for the website is given in the description below. And for regular updates, follow us on our social media handles.